Hello, YouTubers. Joe Kersey here on December 7th, 2014, about 2 in the afternoon Eastern Time. December 7th, a day that shall live in infamy. Yes, I know we're all friends and buddies now, but it's very interesting. I'm probably at the very, very, very tail end of the age group that grew up listening to, a lot of the guys that were in World War II. Talking about the effect Pearl Harbor had on them in terms of their enlistment or their desire to fight and this sort of stuff. My step grandfather's son was in the Navy, and my mother and dad and my grandmother and then her husband, which would be my step grandfather, and I don't know, maybe a couple of my mother's sisters, were at my step grandfather's house, which was a funeral home in Blanchester, Ohio, having lunch on Sunday, December 7th, 1941, and they were having lunch around, it was around 1:30 in the afternoon. And of course, let's see, Hawaii is 5 hours sort of behind us in the Eastern time zone. So that would have been about 8:30 in the morning over there in Hawaii. Well, the attack occurred shortly after 7 o'clock in the morning, Hawaii time. And they had the radio on while they were eating, as people tended to do then. Well, they were doing it anyway. They had it on. And then this sort of like flash, Pearl Harbor, and talked about the attack. Well, my step-grandfather's son, from his first marriage, his first wife had died, was serving on one of the battleships out there in Pearl Harbor. And of course, there was just sort of this dead silence, at the table, because that's, everybody pretty much appreciated what that might mean. Turned out he came through pretty much unscathed, although, of course, a number of the people on his ship were killed. Ship wasn't sunk, but it was heavily strafed. And I guess there was some sort of spillover damage from explosions on an adjacent ship. Oh, golly. Well, anyway, as I said, I think I'm the last. Paul and I are sort of the last of that age group that grew up hearing about this, very repeatedly. And nowadays you rarely even hear it mentioned. Now, somebody mentioned it at church today. But there have been a couple of years here recently that it wasn't mentioned. So I don't know how much of that's due to the desire to be politically correct and You know, we're all buddies and friends together now. Or I don't understand that. You know. People were killed; they should be remembered. I dare say the Japanese are remembering the ones that died in their various wars and attacks, or battles during Second World War, as do the Germans. The people that died weren't the ones that initiated the policies that resulted in all that nonsense. Well, so much for that. Well, today's the second Sunday in Advent, and I read the lectionary selection from the Second Epistle General of Peter, chapter 3. I think starting at verse 8. I think pretty much toward I think verse 15. That's a good one, guys. Look it up. Ideally in the authorized version, King James version, which is the other name for it. The proper name for the King James version is authorized version. And I didn't do the prayers. The other individual reading with me did the prayers, which unfortunately were these, this litany of healing. It's some new age claptrap, but all right, fine. Good tunes, though. I'll tell you, some of these Advent hymns can be either weird or massively fun to sing. And we were a fairly small number today for a 10:30 service. We were probably just a hair over 30. That's small for a 10:30 service. Well, this is typical. When a rector announces he's pulling the pin and leaving, it's amazing how many people sort of scatter to the hills. Now, they may not leave, they may not be leaving, but you just don't see them for a long, long time, and then eventually most of them filter back, but, this is like when everybody takes to, that's like when the animals, take to the bushes to hide, Well, it's getting kind of quite cool here. It's, oh my word, it's gone down to 34. So I tell you, I'm going to metastasize into the house here, folks. Oh, yes. Well, the genesis of me going outside in the first place was I had seen a red-tailed hawk right up here in the maple tree, just outside, just off the back deck. And I think he may have actually nailed one of those squirrels that were roaming around here on our poor trail. I haven't seen any conclusive evidence of that, but there's at least one hawk that's been fairly adventurous this last summer and fall that's been trying to nail a couple of these squirrels. He got one day. Saw him, we scooped down, got it in his claws and flew off with it, and then went up into the sycamore tree and proceeded to eat it. But he then flew from the maple tree over to one of the sycamore trees adjacent to the creek, along the creek, and shortly after he was approached by a female. Now, their mating season typically is in sort of March-ish, Aprilish. And you'll see them doing these mating flights. Way, 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 way. They'll circle way, 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 way up into the air, and swoop and horse with each other, and I don't know if mating occurs up in the air or not. In any case, but this was clearly a female, because the females don't have the red tail feathers. Only the males got the red tail feathers. Either that or this might have been a young male, but this other bird flew off, and then the red-tailed male followed this bird. So I'm assuming it was a female, unless our backyards become the equivalent of a gay bar pickup site for red-tailed hawk. And this more mature red-tailed male was trying to pick up a younger guy. Well, that does happen sometimes in these bars, doesn't it? So I'm told. How did we get here? How did we get there? Well, last night, Paul and I sat up, as is generally not our wont, and watched this Ohio State-Wisconsin football game on television. And my son Thomas said to me that the Big Ten, which is really the Big 14 now, championship game, is on TV tonight. And he said, Carter and I are going to watch it. I said, I always called the Big Ten championship the regular season. Well, leaving that aside, Tall and I did sit up and watch this, and I lasted till 11 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, and the score was 45-0. I mean, this was amazing. I mean, Wisconsin's a good team. And Ohio State, basically just had them bamboozled for the most part, or shut down, or both, or whatever. Oh, there was one Ohio State player, interestingly, an offensive Ohio State player ejected for a targeted head hit on one of the defensive guys of Wisconsin. I mean, generally that's a call they make on a defensive player. There must have been some yo mama type talk going on between these two guys. But he's thrown out for the rest of the. I mean, he was thrown out. They sent him back. Put on your clothes and go sit in the stands, bud. They kept very quiet about that the rest of the game. Generally, they replay a lot of stuff like that, but they didn't. These news hypesters, so-called news hypesters, sportscaster hypesters, didn't yak about that. So I went into the chemo chair there about 11 minutes to go, and Paul sat up. I don't know whether he was in and out. He was sort of napping, then he'd wake up and watch something, and then a little bit. And I didn't wake up till around. I don't know, 3:30, and you go in and take a leak, and I thought, well, I'll check my email, and then, plus I wanted to find out the final score of the game, and it turned out it was 59-0, 59-0. Again, for what it's worth, and. So I laid down, I went to sleep. Now, I didn't wake up again until 20 till 8. And the house is dark and the house is quiet. And I thought, well, Hell, Paul must have gone to work because he was supposed to be at work by 8. And I wander out here, and no, his coat's on the back of his chair, and oh my word! And so I woke him up immediately, and he said something other than that when he was awakened. But anyway, he was going to be he ended up being at least 15 minutes late. That's the first time in over 3.5 years that he's been, well, 3 3/4 years that he's been late or at all. And I frankly expected them to fully send him home, and say take a vacation day. But no, he's either still at work or he's gone off to lick his wound somewhere. Well, that certainly isn't going to be a feather in his cap, as they said in Catch-22. It's going to be a black mark against his name. I didn't hear his alarm go off. Generally, I'll hear his alarm go off. And, he didn't hear it go off, and I didn't hear it go off, obviously. Well, see, that'll teach us to stay up and watch these football games, won't it? Well, okay. Perhaps a little bit more we'll see.